Hi everybody, welcome. It's Jaff here from Medieval Mirage. I really appreciate you joining me today and I hope you're all doing well. So this is basically a follow-up video due to the fact that many were very interested in the tutorial that I shared on coffee tea staining with stencils. That will be listed in the description box below if you're curious. So we're just revisiting this due to the many questions, and some others wanted to actually see the drying process. So I went ahead and created another tutorial. This time it's a little bit different, as you will see, but the principles still apply from the one that was the previous tutorial. And so I hope this is going to be helpful. I've created timestamps for those that want to just get to the drying process, but you're going to see it from start to finish within reason. And it's true, there will be a bit of talking, but not as much as before, because talking is part of the tutorial. It helps you identify things and clarify things. So please join me on this, and I really appreciate you all. Enjoy this presentation. Hey everyone, welcome. It's Jaff here from Medieval Mirage. Thank you for joining me on this tutorial. So it's again using stencils. Today is the 25th of June 2024, and I hope you're all doing well. I want to welcome all the new subscribers. Thank you so much for joining in. I really appreciate you all, and of course to all my beautiful subscribers with your beautiful support. I really appreciate you also. I hope everyone's doing well, and yeah, let's just get started. Let's revisit this particular technique from start to finish with some helpful tips that many of you asked about. So all that I use is plain printer copy paper, 80 GSM, but you can choose any size and paper weight and paper texture to your personal preference. I just use instant coffee, it's cheap. I use generic tea bags, they're cheap as well. I leave the papers to dry in the tray. Just leave papers to dry in the tray. That's what it's all about. Air dry is better than heat gun or hair dryer, and it may take approximately 1 to 3 days for papers to dry depending on the climate and any other conditions. So if you're indoors, it'll depend on your heating. If you're outside, it's going to depend on whether you have humidity or not, or whether it's a real dry heat. The recipe, coffee and tea together, creates a really beautiful hue. I love it. But you can use coffee or tea on their own. If you don't like coffee, go for tea. If you don't like tea, go for coffee. And someone also asked about types of trays, especially could they use something metal. If you're going to use something metal, make sure it's not something that's going to rust, because it will affect the results. And the types of trays that are useful are either plastic serving trays, a ceramic, or stainless steel. So this is my basic recipe. You can adjust it to your needs. Just do a test with plain paper once it's cooled down, and write down your recipe. This is just my basic one. You might want to play around with the different amounts. But basically, boiled water, 3 metric cups. I use 3, sometimes to 3.5 tablespoons of coffee, heaped sometimes, sometimes not, and then 3 to 4 tea bags. Why 4? Well, tea bags are a lot weaker than coffee, so sometimes I even increase it up to 6. It just depends on how I'm feeling that day. Now, the salt and the tea tree oil are actually only an option. But if you're worried about mildew or mold because the papers are taking longer to dry, then salt is a great preservative, and so is tea tree oil. I would recommend that you add the salt and melt it when you're also adding your coffee and your tea. But the tea tree oil, I would wait till it's cool and I would add a couple of drops as a preservative, but it's also a lovely refreshing scent. But you can use any essential oils. I love vanilla essence as well. A lovely viewer recommended baking paper. For those of you that don't have a lot of papers, because the whole method about this is using sandwiching a stencil, one stencil between 2 to 4 papers on either side, to stop that interplay or a confusion of the stencils kind of melding into each other. They can look good at times, but if you want that clear, precise stencil effect, then you will need to sandwich it. However, it was suggested to put baking paper as a way of stopping that from happening. So to honor that lovely suggestion, I went ahead. However, I was concerned that it would wrinkle things up, and it did, but you'll see a little bit later on with what I mean. These are the envelopes that I'm going to be using in this tutorial. I recommend that you keep the flaps open to prevent the flaps from being prematurely sealed. Okay, I'm putting the baking paper down. Alright, let's now start on with the envelopes, though I don't want to do that because it'll wrinkle up the envelopes. So let's just do a couple more papers. One of the reasons I don't want to be using baking paper, but I'm happy to do it, and I have done baking paper copy stained on its own, is because of its wrinkling, and that it could kind of compromise the stencil impression. Alright, so this is the cheaper paper envelope, so we'll see how they perform. those little bits and pieces. You can see the tea bag has broken in here, so it's releasing the tea bags. I mean the tea leaves. And my stencils were used for another project, so they have other colors on them as well. So I do my best to clean things off, but some things just never fade. All right, so normally I would be putting more layers, but because I am time poor today, I'm trying to just do a bit of both so that you can experiment with how many papers you're going to be stenciling in between. The good thing about envelopes is you have a double page, so that kind of can, you know, sort of protect it from an interplay of stencils. I'm going to chip out some of the water. You don't want it bone dry. You just don't want that to happen. You can still use the same principle with papers, but if you only want papers, then I recommend you watch that video. That's either in the screen with the icon of an information icon, the eye, or just go into the description box and it'll be there. So if you don't want to be doing envelopes, that's the one I would recommend for you to watch. As you can see, I didn't make enough, did I? Enough brew? I didn't think. I'm going to be timing this so that you can see how to get papers done in a tray in winter without needing to spread out throughout the whole home. Is now add this on the top just to separate everything. I'm down to the dregs, as you can see. And just also remember, if you're down to the dregs, like I am, you can always pour. But you don't want it bone dry. here we go. We finished at 12:20 p.m. on the 25th of June 2024, Australia, Melbourne. It is winter. I've got my heater over there, heater full blast, and I'll try to film the process of the papers peeling off and so forth. That's it. I'll see you in the next section of this tutorial. My craft room is really messy at the moment, but that screen that you can see is not normally there. I'm just trying to not distract you with all my projects that are sort of on the table sky high. So, but there's our heater over here, and there's my chair. So in the evenings when we head off to sleep, we have our heater on just one setting, and that chair would be pushed right back, completely pushed right back. However, that's how it sits. It sits safely away, and it's in directional heat. And then I'll put something in front of it. I use this just to prop it up, just to see the liquid. It's all about checking what's going on underneath. Because look, it's pooling with a lot of liquid. So you can pour some of that liquid out if you wish, but we don't want it to be bone dry. Okay, so this is how much has come out of this whole thing. But I'm going to leave it like that because I don't mind a little bit of extra grunge on some of my papers. If it's too much for you though, then definitely pour it out in your container. But just make sure there's still enough liquid for this process to work. So this is all you do. You just leave it in here until the top layers of the papers start to dry. And a lot of the liquid disperses into the paper or evaporates, and then you can prop it up like so, right? To get even more directional heat into drying things quite carefully, especially if you're inside. Okay, so I'm back here again. So just what I wanted to show you is so if I'm propping it up like so, on where I've shown you near the heat, right now this is just going to really be pooling. That is a lot. So this is telling me I need to keep my tray flat until all that pooling ceases. If I come back after an hour or two and I test it and it's still really damp, I might leave it another hour, or there's a lot of saturation, then I might end up leaving some out. So I might just do a little bit of that now, but I don't want it bone dry. So you can move it around like this, as if you're panning for gold. Maybe on this side. Okay, so here it starts spilling out. But I usually wait a couple of hours, because if you've got directional heat, it's going to evaporate the water anyway. I'm going to set that there to dry. Hey everyone, so I just wanted to show you, there is another way that I like to prop it up, and that's lengthways, as you can just see here. So you'll remember I had it on its side. Now it's 2:24. Okay, so we've got 2.5 hours later, or is it 2 hours later, and it's still allowing for quite a bit of moisture, but it's not a deluge. So you can just see it pooling there. Let's just grab that camera there. Okay, so it is pooling. Now I'm going to again lie it flat, so you might be able to see how it's pooling here, but there's not a lot. It's not a flood.
So you want it to have a bit of moisture, but then you don't want it over the top. If it's too much moisture, it will take longer to dry. So I'm going to, you can either mop it up if you want to, you can drain it, but personally it's not really worrying me at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lie it flat again. Okay, so there it is back on the chair. Always lay it flat until there's no more pooling. So the only reason why you're seeing it propped up is for me to check how much residue liquid there is and how to treat it. So this is how it's looking 2 hours later, and I'm just going to leave it there, and then I'll just prop it up in another couple of hours to see how much liquid is pooling. Once it stops pooling down wherever I stack it up, then I will just keep it propped up, because the papers then have the ability to dry a lot faster in a propped up position. Hey everyone, so it's 5:20 and you can see what I'm talking about. Have a look at this. See how that's peeling? It's already wanting to come off. So this is where you just have to feel the papers. Now interestingly, you might notice there's a bit of leakage here. So I think what I'll do is I'll leave it sitting flat again, and then we'll deal with the top papers. So just bear with me. Okay, so I've just put it back on my table, but you can see how that's all peeling away. Now some of these are still quite damp, so I'm happy for them to just stay there. See how it's kind of got that glossy look? See, I wouldn't be touching these papers at all. I'm happy for this very top sheet to come off. So this is what we started off with, and I've peeled off these two. Okay, so these envelopes are done. So see, this is peeled off, so I'm just going to put them back the way they came out. But I'm willing to just take off that face. See, there's going to be a bit of paper injury here, and we get that glossy effect. But I think I'm going, oh look at that, that's beautiful. Oh, I love that. So you want that contact, but as it's peeling up it could lose that contact. So one other thing you could do, if you feel that these are curling up and it hasn't had time to process, you could put a couple of books down. So I could put this on here, like so, to stop it curling up, just for a couple of hours until it's had time for it to do its thing, and then I can put that in front of the heater again, just to get the air heat onto it. Okay, so that was 5:20, it's probably now, but yeah, so there was still a bit of seepage coming through, not a lot. All right, morning everybody. It is this is the date today, and it's 8 a.m. in the morning. So we started this on the 25th at 12:20 p.m. and then I've been filming myself consecutively, so now we're up to here. Now I must admit, I was picking at this this morning, and then realized, hang on a minute, I better be filming myself. Okay, so just remember that there will be paper injury. You kind of have to expect paper injury with this method and technique. Coffee tends to stick, so if you don't like that, maybe tea might be best. But yes, so see, these are all dry, but what's happened is that we're getting that glassified look that I told you about in the other video, which will be linked below. You may lose a couple of pages
but it is a random thing and it may not always happen. It's just one of those things to expect, but be assured that it's not going to happen on every page. It just randomly happens now and then. I'm just letting you know to expect it. This might not happen in every case, but I wanted to show you that it can happen to anyone. So don't be concerned if it happens to you. So you can take your time, but this is like totally glued on. So that's that, and that was a bit of a disaster, but we kind of have to expect it. So what you do with these, if this happens to you, just put them in a bath of warm water with a bit of soap, let them soak, the paper will come off. You might need to do a little bit of scrubbing here and there, but you should be okay. So that's a shame about that, but honestly, it's not going to be the end of the world because you will get more beautiful produce from it. I mean, look at this. Okay, so these I haven't touched. They're floated around a little bit because I had to move that around. Now this is still damp to touch, but I think now it's pretty safe. So again, it's cool to touch. It's not damp to touch, it's cool to touch. So it still needs a bit of air drying. So I will do a flip through again of these, but we're just going through these so that you can see how they've turned out. Okay, so I'm just putting mine here in the reverse so that you can see them coming out when they do. All right, so now this is the test. Is it time to pull this off? It's not even been 24 hours yet, really. This one has really adhered beautifully, so I can take that off quite happily, but I'm just a little bit loath to do it with this though. Possibly that might still develop, but see, these lighter pages have dried. That's why they're light. This is a bit darker because it's still wet. Okay, so let's just leave it there for now. I'm going to possibly pop it up like this now to get more directional heat. But at the same time, if it's peeling off too quickly for you and the bottom parts are still wet, put something on top of them to hold them firm so that they still have time to have contact with the stencil above. Hey everyone, so I just wanted to show you that it's now 9:15 a.m. So I can actually now lift this off and put that aside, and this is what we've got. So this is what I mean. You can just be taking the top layers off so the ones underneath can dry. Yeah, so I'm still not going to pull these off because they feel still damp to touch, but whatever is really dry I'm happy to pull away because there's no stencil now, and this is the results we're getting. The one, and this is dry as well, just a little bit damp here, but I think it's absolutely fine now. So it's one of those things, if it's soggy, if it looks dark, so can you see how dark it is along here compared to here? That's because it's still damp. So this here is the baking paper. See how dark that all is? And these impressions are from the this bit here, the wrinkling of this. So see, I'm really desperate to see what's going on underneath, but again, it's a process of patience. Okay, everybody, so it was 9:15. Do I put it up like this? Oh, well, this is coming off, so I'll just leave it because there's no stencils now. I think it's gone as far as it can. So I'm just going to lay that on there. Let's have a look at it with this. Because the stencils have come, I think it's done a lovely job. So I'll put all of those over here. So this is quite soggy, but we got our stencil. There's no more processing happening here, and there's no stencil underneath, so we can move it. All right, I'm just going to see what's going on under here. Okay, so this is still a little bit damp, but that's your baking paper, that nice transparent look. So I'm going to flip it around and just lay it on there, and this is what's coming up next. So look very grungy. Hey everyone, so I'm back. Okay, 11:50 a.m. So it's almost 24 hours now. So let's have a look at how this is going. Can you see how it's sort of going like this? Well, that's when you can start peeling them off, and they've done their thing. So a little bit of that kind of glossiness is there. And that just got stuck. Okay, so this is a little bit damp still. So now, as you can see, I've accidentally moved this. The paper underneath it is quite dry. So I might just let that air without this, because I don't really want to, or I might just leave it just like that. Okay, still feels a bit damp, so I'm going to leave it for a bit. Hey everybody, okay, so the date now, I mean the time now is 2:36 p.m. all right, so it's now past the 24-hour mark, but only by a couple of hours. Again, our heater is going, and I just wanted to show you, see how things are just sort of plopping along. Well, it's a good opportunity to absolutely grab them and peel them off, because in that way things can be drying faster than what they are. Okay, now I must admit it is very hard to be patient. Normally I would be leaving it alone, but for the sake of the video I'm checking all the time. So that's something I wouldn't be doing over the top as I have been today. So now these look like they've done a really good job already. Will these papers submit to being pulled apart? Yeah. So this is still quite damp, but it has still left its impression quite nicely. I'm just going to put that there. So you have it. And I think I did tear some of the paper by accident. Oh, see, I accidentally teared that. Alright, so this is still a bit damp, and it could compromise this paper. But it's for the sake of the video, I'm happy to do that. But this one here hasn't been compromised at all. It's come out quite nicely. Okay, and this is all very damp. Just going to leave it to dry. All right, back in front of the heater again, and I will see you soon. Hey everyone, it is now 3:45 p.m. Okay, so I've got this propped up like so. That's how it's looking. So we're going to take it up and check it out. All right, so whoops, so as you can see, it's drying up really nicely. Now the back of the papers here are still wet. But I'm pulling them off just for the sake of the video. And this can happen when things are wet. Sometimes when things are dry, they don't get stuck. But for the sake of the video, and of course this is sort of, I don't know what's happened to the poor thing. It really does depend on the stencil as well. Sometimes it will work, sometimes it won't. It's just a random thing, but the great thing is you've got a harvest full of coffee stain papers with interesting effects. So yeah, okay, so now see, all of this is really dry, but not this. So it could just be the paper of the envelope and so forth. Now I'm not going to lift this up because I don't want to compromise what's happening underneath. That's it at 3:45. So some papers are going to dry faster than others, but that's where you just have to trust the process and remember that the process requires patience. Hey everyone, so it's 8:30 p.m. right now, and sorry my lighting isn't going to be perfect. I'm sort of slowly closing everything down for the night, so I've pulled out the plugs for the lights over here. But I'm just going to, so the lighting might not be good, but this came off, sort of slipped off, and see how they're curling. And this is what I mean about when they're curling, you might want to have something heavy on here. So just to give it a chance to really have contact with the stencil, you might sometimes need to put something down there, I don't know, for about an hour or so, maybe up to 2, but no longer than that. But that can happen, it'll just peel up. But it looks like it's left some impression, but I might just do that. Just put this water bottle on there. And yeah, I'll just leave it overnight. I'm not going to be doing any more to it. And we can check back in tomorrow. So a day and a half, I guess you would say. Anyway, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Hey everybody, good morning. It is the 27th of June. It's 8:45 a.m. and of course that is winter over here in Australia. Okay, so these have been peeling off, and the reason why there's no impression here because there was an envelope, but you can see how the stencil has come through nicely there. This is the batch where everything is going. So you can see the envelopes were here, and the reason why we've seen these is because it's wrinkled and it creates that impression. But there's how distinct the stencil is. So when the stencil is not interfered with, like it's just plainly sitting on top of the paper it's supposed to be decorating, it will come out quite clear. But if there's any interference, it's because there's something else that's been in the way. But you can see the reverse negative on that. Yeah, so these envelopes, something interesting has been happening. Because there's a fold here, it seems to pick it up on the other side, which then interferes with the actual stencil development. And this is still a bit damp on this side. So we've got a bit of adhesiveness happening. Again, we had envelopes here. The reason why I'm having a trouble is because my head is going to get in the way of the camera. So I'm trying to keep my head out of the camera, but it doesn't mean I can get to these images very well. Okay, so just very gently peel things off, and these are still a tiny bit cool. So just be aware that this can happen, the paper injury. Again, another envelope was there. So the envelopes do get in the way of our impressions. Okay, so these are just cool to touch, but I will just leave them. And because there's been variations in paper sizes with the envelopes and the larger pieces, the envelopes seem to have soaked up most of the moisture onto them, and therefore it's created a little bit of a uneven drying, but that's to be expected. Hey everybody, okay, it's 11 a.m. and on the 27th of June, sorry, that's not very clear. Okay, it's 11 a.m. and this is again doing its stuff in front of the heater. I've got gloves on because I'm going to do some more coffee, tea staining, some fabric and stuff like that. So that's what I'm ready to do. But I thought I'd just quickly show you how this is going. So this was on top of this. I'm sorry, I've taken that off. And that is so beautiful. A lot of that is from the wrinkling. So these papers do, these envelopes do wrinkle a lot. So that's really pretty. Again, due to the wrinkling, and also one of the other things to mention is there is baking paper, and the baking paper is kind of creating different results. And that's why it's not producing the results that I kind of would have liked. I'm happy to do baking paper separately on its own because I know what it does, but it's not my favorite results. So this is sort of slipped off, and so that's really pretty there. So the baking paper leaves these kind of results. Okay, so there's quite a bit of green from that. I don't know what happened there. That's very weird. Alright, so this is still a bit damp, so it needs to sit in the front of the heater because this is just still a bit damp to touch. So, okay, so I'm going to leave it. I will be back later. Welcome everyone. It is now 1:25 on the 27th. Well, 1:27 I should say p.m. And okay. So this is still a little bit damp on the sides here, and the reason why it's damp is because of this being a block, which would make it hard for it to dry out because it's just been wedged in. And then we have the baking paper there. I could absolutely take it off by now, even though it is a bit damp. It's not interfering with the stencil, so I can do that. Okay, so that's that. Let's turn it over now. Remember, the baking paper is going to distort the stencil, so please be aware of that. Okay, so everything's a bit stuck here. I'm going to turn it upside down so I can get at it, because we don't want to be here forever. And So these are just cool to touch. It is a bit wet. Okay, so it is quite wet, but for the sake of this video not to go on forever, I'm just showing you. Isn't that just fantastic? Look at that. That is just glorious. I love that. So that was the papers overlapped like so. And look at that. That's fantastic. Okay, so that's how the papers have overlapped. Like this. I think the other reason this can happen is because it's so intricate. Because it's so intricate, everything kind of gets stuck. So you need to take your time and just very carefully try to pull it apart. If it's still damp, just let it dry completely. Just very gently peeling. Okay, there we have that. This has been impacted by the baking paper. Hey everyone, so here it is. According to my very bad mathematics, you guys can correct me if you like. We started on the 25th of June at 12. Well, we didn't start, we finished the coffee staining, tea staining at 12:20 p.m. on the 25th. And then by 1:27 p.m. I had dismantled the whole lot after peeling and peeling. And so I gave it another half an hour near the heater, but at safe directional heat, just a pile of them to just air dry completely. So roughly it's about 2 24-hour days and approximately 2 hours. It could be 1.5 if you like, but just an all-rounder. This is in winter, this is inside. Basically they've been in directional heat. 2 24-hour days, and that's 2 and 2 hours. All right, so I've just flipped them over so that you can see from the very beginning. Okay. You will get paper injury, so just be prepared for that. And there's that kind of dreaded glossy effect, but don't worry, the other side tends to come out really nice. Okay, so that's what happens with the paper injury. It's going to happen. Why? I guess it's to do with the plastic suctioning itself onto the papers, especially when there's a border around it, like it just sticks like glue. The other thing to keep in mind is that when you're coffee staining, sometimes it can act, coffee can be quite sticky and it can sort of act like a glue. So please be mindful that the other thing that kind of interfered with the results wasn't just the baking paper, it was also the positioning of the envelopes. So I mixed the envelopes up with paper, and that could also affect it. I wasn't too worried about this because this was doubled up, so I wasn't really worried if there was going to be an interplay of stencils. Okay, now these ones are going to be darker because they were at the top. Remember, I've talked about things that are on the top and they're exposed are going to be oxidized the most, and that's where you get that really grungy look. And you know, sometimes they will work, other times they won't. This has been the result of the baking paper, sort of adding another kind of dimension, and it distorts the actual pattern. That's the other thing, if your paper is really wrinkly, it will distort your impression, and sometimes they can go blurry. I mean, that is gorgeous. There's just a little bit of paper injury from another piece that I had to pull it off. And that comes from this. So if you're wondering how I got that result, which is like the negative, isn't it, of this. And again, that's the same stencil, but in a different position. The wrinkling is because of the cheapness of the envelope, but it still is beautiful. And again, the baking paper, there it is, the wrinkly baking paper. I love the baking paper. I think it's really great to use. Very loud and crispy. If you like this look, this did it naturally. This is like its own natural stencil because it wrinkles so much, and therefore I got that result. But if you're doing it with stencils, it will compromise the stencil appearance or distort it. So this again is why we do those layerings. Let me show you what I mean. Why it's so important to have more than just one paper down. See that? That's the negative, that's the positive. And if you want to check that out, this was a stencil. So that's what I mean about just leaving them in a tray, layer them up in a tray. You decide how many layers you do at a time, and yeah, just really enjoy some of the magic that's going to come out of this. So you've got those two, and then you get that. So you're missing out on random exciting things from happening if it's just one layer at a time. Just sandwich that stencil between a couple of papers. Even if it's just 2 papers, it is really worth it, as you can just see now. From that one, we're still getting these beautiful results from these, but a very faded effect. I went to the baking paper knowing full well what it would do, but I still went along with it, and it's a reflection on the person that absolutely recommended it. I think some people would absolutely love using the baking paper with everything. I would just do the baking paper separately, but I'm just sharing my preference. And there we go. So that's the baking paper again, and the stencil trying to come through, but the baking paper was interfering with it. Okay then, everybody, so there we have it, and it's just a harvest full of joy. It really is. It's so worth it. So thank you, everybody, for joining me today. I appreciate you all. Thank you so much. So have a great day, everyone. So take care. Bye.